Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fullest podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Bostwick, and today's guest is Grant Wilson, who is the executive director of Earth Law Center. He's an expert on the rights of nature, ecocentric law, water law, and international law. And for the last decade, he has defended the rights and interests of nature all over the world, including by writing new rights of nature laws and winning decisive courtroom victories for rivers and other ecosystems. Grant co-wrote and edited the first law school course book on the emerging field of earth law. He's an expert member of the UN Harmony with Nature Initiative and IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law. And Grant earned a JD with a certificate in environmental and natural resources law from Lewis and Clark Law School. Hi, Grant.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I'm so excited. We had Darlene on years ago from the Earth Law Center, and it was just such a fun podcast to record with her, and I learned so much. And since that episode, I've thought a lot about just the earth, and like at the fullest, we just really believe in getting back to nature and indigenous practices when it comes to everything from our well-being to beauty practices to just how we live on this world, on this planet, and our impact with it. And then recently, I don't know if you saw it, and I'm curious what your thoughts were if you did, but I saw last year Michael Moore's documentary, Planet of the Humans. Have you seen that?
I have seen it, yes.
Yeah. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, because honestly, it was mind-blowing to me. Yeah, I used to drive an electric car. Regardless of what kind of car you drive, like we're obviously making an impact on our environment. That's really what Earth law comes down to. And that's how I understand it. So I'd love to get into what Earth law is and why it's so important. And then we can kind of get into the other things that I think many of us, especially I'm in Southern California, and so many people who are like, oh, I'm an environmentalist and I do all these things. And I think that's great. And I think the intention is there for so many people who believe in climate change, because I don't know anyone that doesn't. But I also believe that there's just so much more to it, and it's become this industry. And we really we have no time, and we need to educate ourselves on what's really going on and how we can truly make an impact. So anyways, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and yeah, let's get started with what Earth law means.
Sure. Earth law is an emerging body of law that seeks to transform our relationship with nature. And it's a series of legal movements, just like human rights law includes various movements that give and recognize basic rights for humans. So some of the legal movements that comprise Earth law are the rights of nature, which is the idea that nature should have basic rights just as humans do, that nature should be a participant in our democracy. And then there's also the rights of future generations, which is the idea that people who are not even born yet today, who will inherit our planet, have a right to a healthy environment themselves. And so it kind of establishes a duty upon us to leave a healthy, thriving, clean, pollution-free, we hope, planet for future generations. Other legal movements are legal guardianship for nature, which are laws that allow people, including local communities, indigenous peoples, and others, to serve as a legal guardian of the natural world, just as a child might have a legal guardian.
That's so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, and that kind of gets to, what role does nature have in our society? And, I think one of the fundamental issues we deal with is right now, nature's role is our property. We buy and sell and exploit nature. But what if nature had a voice in society? And then how do you give nature a voice? Well, guardianship is one way to do that.
That's amazing. And so you're part of creating these laws, right?
Yeah, we do a couple things. We write these laws, so we're working all over the world, kind of drafting the next generation of legal protections for nature. You've probably heard of environmental laws, and those are helpful to slow down degradation. But what we call earth laws are actually restorative of nature. And then we, fight in the courts and train legal professionals as well with this next generation of laws that are more protective of the planet.
So, okay, with all that said, there are so many things we're currently doing that are degrading our environment and the health of the people that live on our planet, because I truly believe that if it's not good for the earth, it's not good for us as people. So we should just always start with what's good for the earth
Mhm.
and think that, have that mentality first. And like things, I'm just curious, like how have you guys helped in the like fight against GMOs and things like that? Is that a place where you guys are really spending time in?
Um, yeah, GMOs, not specifically, but I'd say broadly speaking, yes. I mean, GMOs, some of the philosophical tenets of GMOs are, corporate control over agriculture. It's the idea that you can own nature and actually own the specific genetic qualities of a crop that you developed. GMOs result in the heavy use of pesticides and chemicals and insecticides that are destructive to nature, and so forth. And so, kind of what we do is create a new blueprint of the legal system that's based on the idea that nature has a right to be healthy. And if nature has a right to be healthy, maybe we have to look at GMOs again, because the excessive use of chemicals is impairing the functional integrity of ecosystems. Part of what we do is also empowering local communities with stronger laws. And so, you've probably heard about, farmers, organic farmers, people who are engaged in regenerative agriculture, who, have to compete against, large industrial farming operations that use GMOs and that, don't have access to those crops that they have intellectual property over. And so, a lot of what we do is try to empower local communities with new legal frameworks, which they could, in theory, use to push back against GMOs. So, yeah, I'd say that's part of what we do. Some of the other areas that maybe we're more squarely focused on are river protections, ocean protections, protections of endangered species, deforestation, and some of these topics.
And when it comes to deforestation, I mean, there's just so much happening. Even looking at is it like biomass or biofuel movement?
Hmm.
And like, there's just so much that's come out around that as well. I mean, it all goes back to consumption. So, like, any type of
Hmm.
place where we're trying to extract something is going to be an issue. So,
Hmm.
I'm curious, like, in Michael Moore's documentary, he was talking
Hmm.
about um, what an issue it's become and how is it more
Hmm.
sustainable than having a coal plant. So I'm curious
Yeah.
what you guys do, because again, none of those are beneficial for the earth.
Yeah, and to get to Planet of the Humans, I know there's been some controversy over some of the fact checking, but the big picture there is that we really need to consider what energy sources we're using. Some energy sources that are called quote unquote green energy or quote unquote renewable energy are not green or renewable at all. I know the movie talked a lot about biomass. One other area to bring up is hydropower. Plenty of countries promote and subsidize hydropower, calling it renewable energy. Throughout Europe, for example, in the Balkans and Eastern Europe, where there's the last free flowing rivers in the continent, they're putting up thousands of small hydro facilities to generate quote unquote renewable energy. Because they promote that as a solution to climate change and environmental challenges. But in fact, when you take a closer look at hydropower and biomass and some of these alternative energy sources, they're extremely destructive of nature. Dams, whether they're small dams or mega dams, can completely dry up rivers. They devastate salmon populations, as we see in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. They can flood and displace local communities. And in my mind, something that permanently devastates freshwater ecosystems, as dams do, is not renewable at all if you consider what renewable means from nature's perspective, instead of just humans' perspective. And that's really what Earth Law Center tries to do, is to reframe our thought processes. So we ask, what would nature's perspective be about this? And from the perspective of a river, if a river was a person and it could engage in our democratic system, what would it say about dams? And I think it would have to say that dams violate this river's right to flow, to be home to thriving fish populations, and so forth. And so I think we really need to take a critical look at our energy sources. You mentioned electric cars. Well, if your cars are on the grid, where's that electricity coming from? In some states, like Arkansas, they have almost a majority of their electricity coming from coal, and obviously coal is not a sustainable energy source. Other places are really promoting solar panels, which I think is a superior energy source to many others out there. And so I think asking questions, understanding the nuances, and then really considering what is nature's perspective in all this, because we usually consider that last or secondary to our own, are all important things that we can all do right now.
What is your thought? So you think solar is superior to all the other energy sources that we've come up with thus far?
I think solar and wind are both superior to hydropower. I mean, there's tens of thousands of dams in the United States. Globally, there's 57,000 large dams impacting 2/3 of all major rivers worldwide. And so, I think if you compare that to, solar panels and wind, which, have their own challenges, because obviously you have to get raw materials to construct them. But, I would say they're a superior energy source to many others, as well as to biofuels, which, are associated with the degradation of ecosystems and, greenhouse gas emissions themselves, and so forth.
Yeah, I was curious about that. So people who don't know what biomass is, basically we're like chopping down wood, right, to get our energy. Is that the easiest way to describe it?
Yeah, it's energy produced by living or once living organisms. A lot of it's plants like corn and soy, and you use this to generate electricity. And obviously, a lot of the problems in the world are about degradation of land use, deforestation. I mean, of the Amazon and other places. And I think we need to be restoring ecosystems and not using them for our energy sources.
Hey everyone, I'm interrupting this episode to tell you about Prima. 75 to 90% of all doctor's visits are for stress-related issues. That's a huge number of conditions that can potentially be managed with lifestyle changes alone. Many of us are operating in survival mode, expecting our skin, bodies, and minds to thrive when we're running on empty. And that's why Prima is passionate about helping people manage their stress naturally with their range of products for mind, body, and skin. They're California-based and also purpose-led, and have partnered with doctors to formulate products that specifically tackle this issue. Their products have also been clinically validated for skin, body, and mind. If you're interested in experimenting with CBD for daily stress, try Prima's The Daily CBD Capsules. Another way to incorporate CBD is as a sleeping aid. If you're in need of more restorative sleep and don't want to wake up groggy the next morning, their Sleep Tight is also an amazing way to improve sleep quality without the use of heavy meds. Prima is also offering our listeners an exclusive limited time 20% off offer with the code THEFULLEST. Head to prima.co/thefullest to start feeling better naturally.
And as far as solar panels go, I mean, like you mentioned, the extraction of raw materials necessary to create them is like an issue for sure. And so, like, have you come across, I mean, I think what Earth Law Center is doing is, like you said, you're reframing what's good for the earth. So then maybe we have the framework of creating technology, of creating something that works with our planet, is renewable. And instead of, again, like going back to this place of, let's take this and then I'm going to take this from you and then we'll be able to maybe live in harmony together, and like, I do think any sort of like truly renewable resource exists today.
Hmm. No, not truly renewable, except I think if you can promote degrowth and using less and conservation, then maybe you can have a net gain compared to where we're at today. But I think the big thing we really need to embrace, there's something in water law, in Clean Water Act processes and other environmental laws called best available technology or best available techniques. And sometimes if you're a polluter, if you want to pollute in a river, which I don't think you should be able to do, but this is how the
Yeah.
law works. You have to use the best available technology to reduce the source of pollution to clean up after yourself. And I think when it comes to our energy future, we really need to be using the best available technology, and it shouldn't be just you get a pick from any number of technologies and they have their pros and cons. We really need to promote the most restorative, renewable, and protective technologies when considering not just climate change, not just one place, but the entire community of life on our planet. And yeah, there's no perfect technology, but I think solar and wind are the best we have right now.
Yeah. Have you heard of any that are coming up? Like, I've seen those things like in the ocean that like ride the waves. What is that? Is there like, it looks like a snake and I feel like it gets
Yeah,
in the wave. Is that something or?
yeah, I think wave energy, and I don't know a lot about the environmental impacts there.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's some when you
I'm
put
sure. Yeah.
giant machines in the ocean.
Hmm.
I know that whale species and cetaceans have enjoyed their comparative peace during COVID-19 from less boat traffic, and I'm not sure if how wave energy would contribute to the
Yeah.
well-being of marine species. But yeah, there's a lot of I think it shows there's a lot of creative innovation out there. They have their pros and cons, but there's certain energy sources that we just need to move away from entirely. I think hydropower is just completely incompatible with um, a future in which we live in harmony with rivers and the natural world. I think obviously coal is completely incompatible with a healthy planet, and so I would encourage legislators to regulate the most destructive energy sources, just to get rid of them, to ban them, keep fossil fuel in the ground. And then, what we're left with, which will be a handful of, renewable, sustainable technologies, we can, pick from those and weigh some of the pros and cons. But right now, with tens of thousands of hydro facilities, with coal power, oil power, biomass, I mean, these are low hanging fruit that we should be picking and regulating, and then let's work with what's left.
Yeah. And do you feel that this administration is really like going to be a game changer in that area? Do you feel that they understand that?
I do. I mean, certainly compared to the
The
last
last, yeah.
administration. So, the first thing Joe Biden did for the environment when he took office, a week after he took office, was he ordered a broad review of the Trump administration's environmental policies, including their anti-wildlife policies. And so, Donald Trump had over 100 environmental rollbacks under a range of environmental programs, and part of the work Joe Biden will do is to reverse all of those things, or hopefully all of them. But then, if you take
Yeah.
the broader look, and this is, I think, what makes Earth Law Center's perspective important. If you look at the broader perspective, transcending Republican and Democratic offices, we've seen the consistent, steady decline of nature in the United States over the past, several hundred years. And, to give a few examples, We once had up to 2 million wolves in the lower 48 states. Now there's 7,000 wolves in only 9 states
Wow.
in the lower 48. And the Biden administration right now has not relisted these wolves as endangered, even though there's as low as less than 1% of their historic population. And just last month there was a big wolf kill in Wisconsin, where over 200 wolves were killed in under 60 hours. And this is something that all Democratic and Republican administrations have allowed. The an onslaught against species in the United States. They've allowed 84,000 dams to be built on our rivers. They've allowed the air pollution such that over 300,000 people in the U.S. every year die of respiratory disease due to air pollution. We've seen an ecocide of certain ecosystems, such as the Great Plains, which was, an amazing, unique ecosystem in North America, and over half of which has been destroyed, much of which for agriculture and development. We've seen the loss of American bison, which now only exists in Yellowstone in terms of populations that are genetically pure.
Wow.
And so you have to ask yourself, Biden's going to undo a lot of what Trump did, and he's going to do some stuff better. I mean, he's called for pretty strong renewable energy targets. But in terms of the big picture here, we're losing ecosystems and species, and I still don't think we're on a track to see the restoration of nature and for humans to live in harmony with the natural world, which goes beyond anything that the major parties are doing right now. But I think should be part of the discussion. Is limited or lesser environmental degradation good enough? Is slowing down the rate of degradation good enough? Are wolf species that are slightly above extinction, slightly better than extinction, kind of teetering in that gray area, good enough? Or should our goal really be restoration and harmony with nature? And that's what Earth Law Center pushes for, is kind of this greater vision that we can live in harmony with the natural world, although it's going to take transformative change to get there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I hope that there's, you're working with the UN, it sounds like, so obviously that's going to make a huge difference. But I think that what we do here in the States is really what people look to in other areas, even. And I mean, I know that there are so many countries that are like in Europe and whatnot that are doing amazing things, but I think we have such a big imprint. And so if we can kind of model practicing these things, it makes such a big impact. And like you said, it's terrifying for people. I mean, I don't know if you have children, but I have children. And so it's like you said, I mean, it's their right to be able to live here and to be able to inherit an earth that's not polluted. And my whole thing, and with the fullest, I mean, we believe that everyone should have access to clean air, water, soil, food. And I think those basic human rights and the rights of the earth to have that be clean have totally been taken. And like you said, people are allowed to, like DuPont, it's like they're allowed to pollute our environment. Or I just heard, I live, like I mentioned earlier, I live in Southern California, so really close to Catalina Island. And I heard that they had found just a bunch of canisters under the ocean or in the ocean bed, of DDT. And that's how they disposed of it. And it's what people are swimming in. Or what's going on Kauai right now with Monsanto Bayer just doing experimental practices of pesticides that haven't even gone under any approval. They're just testing it on, and these indigenous populations are being affected. And it's just so heartbreaking to hear, because I guess what I'm gathering is that what you guys are doing is you're creating the framework so that other people can go on and use that framework to fight or to stand up for the earth and to stand up for these things that are happening in their communities.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you mentioned children. There's a study that found an average of 200 industrial chemicals in the umbilical cord of a child. So people are being kind of thrown into the hot pan right at birth, and had no say in it. They're totally not responsible for the degradation that they're born into. But yeah, exactly about Earth Law Center. The reason that all these things are happening, that there's these testings of new pesticides that are illegal in Hawaii, and just the massive degradation of nature, is that companies are operating within a legal and economic system that rewards them for exploiting nature. I mean, it's a benefit for a company to destroy a forest, or to put up a development in a sensitive area, and our economic system encourages that because it could increase our GDP, and because nature is defined as property. Corporations are built to maximize the exploitation of property, and for a profit. That's what they do. And so, I would say, you can blame DuPont, you can blame pesticide companies, but really, they're the natural result of a legal system that enables and encourages them to exploit the natural world. And again, we do have some good environmental laws, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Endangered Species Act. They're all helpful, but what they do is just limit and regulate environmental degradation, but never reverse it. Additionally, companies kind of consider, fines or other consequences under environmental laws as a cost of business. So,
Yeah.
That's just kind of part of their business sheet. So I think we need, a couple of things. One is really enforce new rights for people. We have a right to a healthy planet. Let's start really enforcing that. For nature, I think nature has a right to a healthy planet as well. For future people, they have a right to inherit a healthy planet. And then, additionally, I think we need to, really take a deep look at how our economy works, what business practices are acceptable. Nobody spent a single day in jail after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Yet, people spend decades in jail for recreational drug use. And so I think we really need to look at some of the fundamental purposes and legal paradigms that we work within and challenge them.
When you brought up the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act, like you said, like it's not restorative. And so are those areas that you guys are directly working on to change those laws?
Yeah, we are working on new interpretations of them, or stronger interpretations. The Clean Water Act, for example, that's actually something that Donald Trump rolled back quite a bit. Kind of traditionally, it's been used to ensure that pollutants are cleaned up in rivers, that we're not dumping too many toxic substances or too many of a chemical that's harmful to humans and fish life into a river. But I think a way that the Clean Water Act is underutilized, that we try to apply it with, is to ensure that rivers have enough water in them, and to ensure that entire watersheds are healthy with adequate flows to support aquatic life and wetlands and water-based ecosystems. And so that's something that we try to do, is to say, look, the Clean Water Act isn't just about the chemical substance that's in the water between the embankments of a major river. It's about protecting the health of entire watersheds and ecosystems. And so that's kind of a holistic view of the Clean Water Act. And I think when we look at any of our environmental laws or any environmental issues, we really need to get out of the habit of looking at one narrow specific issue, and look at ecosystems as being holistic and interconnected, and looking at humans as being part of ecosystems as well. And that's something we try to do with all environmental laws, for sure.
What is your opinion or any information that you have on like geoengineering?
Oh my gosh. Geoengineering is a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, with one hand, we're fueling climate change, and then the other hand, we're promoting these totally untested, risky, possibly as bad or worse than climate change in terms of impact technologies that we have no idea what they're going to do. I think there's this hubris amongst humans that we know how to control nature, and this actually started back during the period of scientific enlightenment, when scientists like Francis Bacon said, the Earth is really like a big machine or a giant clock, and we can control it as long as we can pull the right levers. Really thinking that we understand the intricacies of the Earth and can manipulate them. And we've realized lately that we were so wrong. We have just a basic understanding of all the intricacies of nature and how they work together. We know as we've been disrupting it massively, and for us to think that we can, on the one hand, exploit the planet and fuel its degradation by allowing runaway climate change, and on the other hand, somehow correct that through the massive manipulation of the Earth's climate, which is what geoengineering is, I think is totally irresponsible and shows that we haven't learned that there's no easy solutions to environmental protections. We have to address root causes, which are extraction, exploitation, um, use of fossil fuels, and so forth. And so, I'm pretty strongly against geoengineering as a solution to climate change, because it's not a solution to climate change. It's an experiment on the planet's health, and we know what the solution to climate change is. It's keeping fossil fuels in the ground. It's eliminating our reliance upon oil and other fossil fuels. And it's transforming our economies so they're in harmony with the natural world rather than exploitative of it. So I'm quite concerned about geoengineering.
I am too. I think that's like probably one of the biggest things that not that everything's concerning for sure, but I think it's one thing that a lot of people also just don't know about as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard to find information on. And so that's something I really want to talk to you about, because I think that I'm sure that you guys are working on laws around that. But given that you're creating framework for others to also be able to do work around that, I'm curious how people can get involved. Because like you said, it's being sold as an answer to climate change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really terrifying to think that we can just go up and spray things like aluminum in the environment and think that
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna cool our environment down enough. It's similar to like our just our mentality around well-being and health in general. Like, you need to get to the root cause of what
Mm-hmm.
your issue is. You can't just take a pharmaceutical band-aid that'll help
Mm-hmm.
and create issues in other areas. It's exactly the same thing. And so, especially our community and our audience, we really
Mm-hmm.
understand the need to really gut into the root cause and do those things. But at the same time, I think part of it has to the conversation has to be around making the decision to not put unnecessary pharmaceuticals in our body, or not, like engage in things like geoengineering that we just don't know what the repercussions are.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and it really is a lot like how we treat our bodies. You mentioned vitamins or experimental medication. When on the other hand, if you're totally abusing your body, that's not going to address the root cause. And really, the planet, we've come to realize, is not that different than our own bodies, and that it's a big organism. It's the Gaia theory or Gaia paradigm that understands the planet as a large living organism of complex systems. And geoengineering that is says that it's kind of a cure to runaway climate change. We're really starting to learn that the cure could be worse than the disease. And in terms of what people can do, well, there's actually a kind of a win last month or the month before, where there was going to be a geoengineering experiment in Sweden, and the Sami people, who are indigenous peoples in that area, actually pushed back against this experiment and said it shouldn't go forth. And they were going to basically release a chalk dust in the atmosphere from a hot air balloon or something along those lines, with the idea being if you did this at a broad scale, it could reflect sunlight and cool the planet. But the Sami people, pushed back and said, manipulating the climate further is not only a violation of nature's well-being, but impacts our indigenous rights as well, because wide-scale geoengineering will change climates. Perhaps the Sami people will see changes in reindeer migration patterns, and their way of life is very much in harmony with reindeer in that part of the world. And we see more people saying that, look, you do widespread geoengineering, there's going to be in addition to the unknown environmental impacts, winners and losers in terms of different climates. And there's going to be, rights violations of peoples whose way of life is impacted because they live in harmony with the natural world. And when you mess with the climate, that changes. And so I think supporting communities who are pushing back against geoengineering is one thing anyone can do. And then being aware of where geoengineering experiments are happening. And, if you're concerned about it, speaking up about it. I will say, there's some things you could call geoengineering that, might be positive. Like replanting native forests that take up carbon from the atmosphere and restoring ecosystems, ensuring that, carbon sinks, as we call them, forests and oceans are healthy and thriving and are interacting properly with the climate. Those are all really good things. And they still
Yeah.
have broad impacts on the climate. But I think there's a lot of stuff we can do besides blasting aerosols into the atmosphere, launching space mirrors, or all the crazy things people are talking about.
Totally. Also, like I recently heard that they had released, this isn't geoengineering, but it goes back to the species conversation, like releasing, I don't like mosquitoes either, but I mean, they're part of our ecosystem. And in Florida, like they released a fleet of mosquitoes that are like supposed to kill, I think, the female population. I think,
Mm-hmm.
like, what are, those, who's like allowing these things to happen? And what's
Yeah,
the reality behind that? Like, how is that happening in this century when we know the importance of things like bees and just anything that's natural
yeah,
for our environment?
yeah, and have done. It has been approved to release genetically engineered mosquitoes in Florida and other places. They've done field tests, and they've kind of said there's a extremely high likelihood that this will not result in, for example, the permanent propagation of genetically engineered mosquitoes all over the planet. Although you can never be 100%, and so I do think it puts ecosystems at risk. The reason that this is kind of happening, I think, is that again, putting the profits of companies developing these technologies over the well-being of the planet, and addressing root causes. For centuries, for tens of thousands of years, humans lived in harmony with the natural world. And just in the last 200 years, that's really changed. And we've seen the wide-scale exploitation of nature. And we've seen the commodification of nature as well in the last 200 years. And I think, genetically engineered organisms, what it gets down to is we're commodifying nature. We're treating it as our property. We're tinkering with it so we can profit from it. And we're, continuing to buy into this flawed system that we own nature, that it's ours, it's our resource. And I think the solution to that is legal and cultural. It's legal in that we need new laws that say that nature has its own right to exist, and that we have a legal duty to uphold, to protect and restore nature. And then it's also cultural. We need to stop looking at nature as something we own and tinker with and exploit. And we need to look at nature as our partner on this planet, our equal, something that has just as much a right as we do to be here. And I think from that new perspective, we'll see us treating nature with respect, and thinking twice the next time we want to tinker with this genetic code to benefit us economically or in some other way.
I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us and telling us more about your work and Earth Law Center. And I'm curious, just if you don't mind, like before we close this episode, just sharing a little bit more about how people can get involved and support you and your work.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Earth Law Center is a nonprofit organization that develops legal theories and trains lawyers all over the world to advance this new generation of earth-based laws. And if you support that, there's a number of things you can do. One, of course, is always to give or donate to Earth Law Center, where we do all of our work entirely pro bono, so it's free for the good of the planet and its local communities. You can also engage in education. If you go to our website, www.earthlawcenter.org, there's educational resources there. We wrote the first ever law school course book on Earth law that's being taught already to students and can be taught at a law school level or an undergraduate level. And so if you're in the educational field, I encourage you to check that out. We also have model laws and templates that if you live in a certain community and you want to see stronger environmental protections, you can draw from to lead your own campaigns at the local level. So I encourage you to check out our legal resources. And then, most of all, I just encourage you to start a conversation with your family, with your local politicians, with local businesses, and let them know that you support some of these emerging solutions to the environmental crisis, and that you want to see bold, transformative change within our relationship with the environment as part of your life mission and your goals. So just start the conversations and support this stuff in practice is especially important.
Thank you so much, Grant. And is there information on like all these things on the Earth Law Center website, or in terms of if someone wanted to look more into geoengineering or look more into hydro fuel and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where do you recommend that they go?
Yeah, a lot of the topics we talked about today are related to our work, but a little bit outside of the scope. I was sure happy to talk about them. The stuff you'll find on our website is about the legal, cultural, and business related change that we need to see happen to live in harmony with nature. And so, if you're interested in the kind of paradigm shifting models, whether you're a business, a student, an educator, you'll find those on our website. So please check those out. If you have a special interest area in geoengineering or genetic engineering or any of those areas, there's plenty of resources out there. I just encourage you to poke around the internet, and when you're doing so, give a chance to the websites of smaller groups that are advocating for more fundamental change out there. There's larger groups that are doing really good work as well, but the smaller ones often have a little bit different perspective. Sometimes it's more progressive and looks at the root causes, and that's kind of what Earth Law Center pushes for. And so I encourage you to look at a variety of resources and educational materials out there in any area you're interested in.
Thank you so much, Grant. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.